Hi, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Founder Wednesdays, a regular stream where we talk to fashion entrepreneurs and founders of direct-to-consumer brands about building scalable, profitable, and sustainable businesses. Today, we are joined by Robin Balser, a founder of Vinokilo, a go-to destination for anyone who is looking for high-quality, affordable secondhand clothing as an alternative to fast fashion. In this conversation, we talk about the secondhand market and its boom during the pandemic, how to build the right team culture and create that vibe that the team will enjoy. And finally, how to scale your company internationally and explore new alternative funding options. So tune in, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hello.
Hey, hi, Rob.
Hi, how's it going?
It's going well. How about yourself?
Very cool. You have a nice microphone. I didn't know that.
I do. You know, I take these live sessions very, very seriously.
Amazing. Really amazing. Yeah, how are you doing?
It's all right. It's been quite nice here in Copenhagen. How about yourself? Where in the world are you these days?
I'm sitting in our office in a small wine village close to Mainz, and they turned the heaters off, so I'm freezing in the evening actually. So I'm sitting here with my jacket and my scarf. Yeah, but yeah, that's where I'm at.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad that you are staying warm despite the circumstances, and that you
No,
found
of
the
course.
time to join me today.
No, I feel very honored, and I'm very curious about all the things you might ask, and I'm excited.
Perfect. Well, for everyone who is joining us now, this is our regular Founder Wednesday stream. It's a regular stream where we talk to fashion entrepreneurs and founders of direct-to-consumer brands. And we talk about building stronger, more profitable, more sustainable businesses together. And today, as I already mentioned, I'm very lucky to have Robin Balser with me, who is a founder of Vinokilo. So today we will talk about all the things secondhand, sustainability, about scaling companies, and many more. If you are new to the stream, please feel free to send us a question. There is a little icon with a question mark in the corner. So press that and send us a question, and we will be covering all the questions at the end of the stream. But to kick it off, Robin, tell me a little bit about Vinokilo and how you ended up starting it.
Okay, we have some time, right? So
Yes, we have plenty of time.
So actually, I'm gonna go way back. There was a time where I was building a different company, right? And that company was called at that time Dark Decade, and it was about swapping and sharing of clothes. We wanted to build an app where you can connect with other people in your neighborhood and basically have your own super large wardrobe, right? So we were building that. It didn't take off, and part of sort of having that idea was also running a store in Groningen, in the student town I lived in at that time. And one day the landlord kicked us out, and we did a kilo sale to get sort of rid of the clothes which we had in that sort of clothing library. And a friend of mine here in Mainz saw that and said, "Hey, you have so many people in front of your store. That's amazing. What did you do?" And I said, "We did a kilo sale." And he was like, "Wow, right? Can we bring that to Mainz?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe, yeah." And then he had a couple of friends, and they had a sort of student flat, 100 square meters, and we just said, "Hey, let's put on some nice music there. We serve some wine, and we bring some vintage clothes, and let's sell it." And we had a huge queue around the block, like 400 people waiting outside, and what happened then was they wanted a second event, and then we did a second event, and then they wanted a third event, which then had 2,000 people, and that's how it all started.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Vinokilo, it takes from vintage and kilo, right? Because it's a kilo
Yeah.
sale.
Exactly. So what we basically after that sort of story of how we started, what we basically now do, we run vintage pop-ups kilo sales across 8 countries in Europe, in which we sell clothes 50s to the 90s at a per kilo price in a sort of feel-good atmosphere of wine, music, live artists, collaboration partners, and also we have an e-commerce store where we sell some of the selected pieces in.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing that has always interested me in Vinokilo is that you're a company that is very much rooted in offline, right? How we call it in the sort of tech digital world. And specifically those sort of events, as you described, like how it all started in the beginning and how it still runs today. Can you tell me a little bit about how did it, you know, you tell how it happened, but like how are you managing to keep it up the same way today, that community feeling, those events, while still scaling the company and going more into e-commerce space?
Yeah, so well, there's several levels to answer sort of that question. Okay, where to start? So first of all, like just to give everyone sort of maybe a magnitude of what we did pre-corona times, we had around 40,000 visitors every month, like 10,000 every weekend. We did in parallel 5 to 6 events, and mostly in countries like Italy, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, Sweden, Denmark also, right? So that was just sort of the magnitude. To how do we create sort of that vibe? I think it has a lot to do with the people we've hired, right? So we have hired really like a very diverse crowd of people who really love the company, love vintage, love creating a big experience, and giving them the sort of responsibility to take the event concept and make it a little bit their own is something I think is very special. So every Vinokilo event is different, right? But at the same time also the same. So it takes the magic of the event managers together with what we've created beforehand.
Yeah. How much effort does it take to scale it across so many places, so many countries in Europe?
Yeah, so what we did at the beginning when we started, it took us like a month to run one event, and as we grew and as we learned, we sort of managed to take less days in preparation to run one single event, and by now we have like 2 days preparation for an event, run the event maybe 2-3 days, and then 1 day where we just wrap things up, right? So we've become very good in the processes, and the logistics team, warehouse team play a huge role in making sure that these events run seamless.
Yeah, so I understand why in the beginning you will have those events, right? Obviously, Vinokilo was not a very known brand at that time. Why do you keep doing it now? And I understand the pandemic and everything, but even before the sort of the second or third wave, you guys still were running events. Why keep it still when you are already a known brand?
Yeah, I think, I mean, also again, there's not one answer to it. Generally, the events are a really amazing experience, right? You go there, you can meet there with your friends. You don't have to buy something. You can just have a wonderful day at our events. You find your sort of vintage treasures. You can feel them, touch them, right? They have a unique sort of thing to them, right? And then you have a glass of wine, you get something from a food truck, you talk to some artists there, and then you check out, and sort of that, all that sort of experience is something remarkable, right? And that creates a sort of glue and a sort of like love of the community for Vinokilo and the mission we are on, right? Giving really an alternative to fast fashion, and that is then also transported to the e-commerce world, right? If you really do something well offline, people will remember it for you. They will search for you and say, hey, in Christmas I'm gonna get my father a vintage jumper from Vinokilo and not something from H&M, right?
Yeah. I think you mentioned something very important there, community, right? And of course, today, nowadays, everyone in fashion talks about community. how to build it, how to maintain it, and so on. I do think with Vinokilo, it's really a lot about the vibe that you guys create, right? And I think events are probably one of the ways how you amplify that. But what is what are the other secret sauces?
I really love that you say vibe, because we say vibe so often here in the office, and people are like, how do you define vibe, you know? And
so what's the secret sauce to that vibe? Because I think it's very hard to fake it, right? You have to be authentic, but how do you maintain it now when you guys have grown so much?
It's a challenge, right? All the time, and I'm not kidding you. We really talk a lot about vibe. I think it has really to do with the people we surround ourselves with, right? Here, the team. So we try really to really try to train with them, to talk with them, to sort of give them that sort of feeling that they will then go, and wherever they run the event, right, will think about the sort of elements which make up the whole vibe, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that is it. I know it's hard to explain, you know, like vibe is such a untangible sort of thing, right? But we try to empower our staff, our team, right, to just go and say they go above and beyond to create a great experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you go about hiring? Like, are there any tips that you can share with founders? Because I think any founder, regardless what kind of business they build, it always comes down to who is your team, right? How can you attract the best type of talent? How can you build that tribe together?
Yeah, I think, I mean, personally, we're constantly struggling on hiring the right people, right? It's always sort of a thing where we're like, okay, will this work? Won't, you know, we don't know yet. But I think it's not so much about that. It's also about, if a person comes, what do you do with that person? How do you make him feel home? How do you make him included into sort of family, right? And that is, I think, what we are good, and to give them sort of that sort of spirit, and which then creates the vibe, right? That is that's a little bit how it is, and maybe even just to mention, you know, like advice to people, right? I think it is really like anyone who creates a company. I think it's their job to constantly be with also the new people, to make sure they get connected, right? That you don't have this sort of disattached sort of company culture, right?
Yeah. As a founder, you often end up creating culture that reflects yourself, right? Or like that reflects the founding team. Do you see traits of yourself in the culture that you have created today at Vinokilo?
Yes, I would say so. I think also it has a lot to do with my upbringing, of what sort of my parents have taught me, what sort of values, right? And I also think, you know, like what we wanted to create at Vinokilo is also something which I was longing for, you know, like something which I've maybe missed even, you know. So you want to do better, or you want to have that sort of beautiful place, right? And that is that's how things came about.
One friend of mine who is also a founder, he mentioned that to me some time ago when I asked him for advice for how to build strong teams. He was like, I just wanted to create a place that will be fun to work at. Like, I wanted to come to work every day and enjoy myself, enjoy the team, enjoy everyone.
100%, you know, and you know, like it's for us, you know, like not many people do this, but in Silicon Valley you get told the opposite. You know, you have to have that sort of perfect structure of team, right? I wanted to create an environment, a place which you love, right? Which you will love going back to. And so most of my friends work in the company, right? So that's just how it is, you know. And yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about secondhand. Obviously, you started Vinokilo when secondhand wasn't really a buzzword, right? And especially over the last couple of months, and I think since the pandemic, we see that in fashion specifically, secondhand has been booming. We've just recently had a massive fundraise announcement from the Collective. So I wanted to get your take broadly on what is happening in the secondhand industry today.
Yeah. So I've actually been asked this question a couple of times, which shows already how much secondhand is at the moment coming to the forefront, and I think it's great, right? I'm really, really happy about it. Sort of when we started, we had sort of 1 in 10 people, right, which we thought would be willing to wear and buy secondhand. At the moment, we think it's sort of like 6 out of 10, right? And it's not enough, right? In ideal case, we have 10 out of 10, right? And what we're seeing is that companies are jumping the bandwagon, right? That there's a bigger companies who are saying, hey, secondhand is booming, you know, all this Greta Thunberg, Fridays for Future, right? All these topics also in the pre-corona times, which already pushed the companies more in that direction, right? Now Corona came, right? And every day on the media, we've been seeing warehouses full of clothes, which are waiting to be incinerated, right? So that is absolutely insane, and the news is just showing all these warehouses, but what's going on in the consumer's mind is, what the hell am I doing, right? I'm buying these clothes, I'm jumping these fast fashion sort of weeks throughout the whole year. There must be an alternative. So they are sitting at home, having a lot of time, seeing all that bad news. Plus they have in mind Fridays for Future, climate change, etc. So there's a massive shift to secondhand because of these things, right? And we think, you know, like the sort of post-corona time will be a time where people will buy less but more consciously, you know, because of all of these sort of factors, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, of course, if you see these funding rounds of the Collective, I think it's great. It's of course the sort of like high value secondhand, but it is secondhand. So we believe this will trickle down through throughout the whole industry.
Yeah. So perhaps we're seeing the emergence of this industry within the industry itself. And as anything else, you probably will have different tiers and different segments within it.
I have two things here. So first of all, I think everyone who are trying to reuse more clothes and gives clothes a second life, that's the right thing, right? And I really promote and I find it fantastic. I do have already, however, a little bit this sort of like, I have problems when companies like H&M, Inditex or whatsoever, they start selling secondhand, right? They've built their profits on years and years of the backs of the climate, on working conditions, and just to create sort of shareholder value. I have a problem with that, right? So it's these two things, right?
Yeah, no, of course. And I think it also comes back to like secondhand being a viable option when you have products that could be reused, that could be, you know, worn several years and so on. And of course, it's sometimes hard to imagine that happening with some of the fast fashion brands where items, they just almost literally disintegrate after 10 washes.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah. So the space itself has been booming. What niche, what segment do you see Vinokilo going after? What place are you going to occupy in this market?
What do you think we will occupy?
That's a good question. Actually, I would say that from my side, I have been getting into secondhand myself as a consumer over the last probably 2 years or so. And I went through this sort of journey of starting with Depop, getting on Vista Collective, trying out Vinokilo actually recently as well. So for me, I think there is a very big difference in terms of the audience and type of fashion that I go for. So Vista Collective is obviously, it's pretty much Chanel's and Dior's of the world. Vinokilo is really something like, if I'm thinking about something super, super unique, that's where I go. Like, a few months ago, I was just obsessed, and I'm like, I need to have a very unique denim jacket. And I've checked everything that I could, and I ended up buying from Vinokilo because it was exactly in the sort of this like a little bit retro style and, you know, what I wanted. So I think, in my opinion, as a customer, I see a very big difference in terms of types of fashion that I can buy there. But what I wanted to understand from your side is it, first of all, is it correct or not? Is that correct assessment from my side? And secondly, is that by design, or is that somehow just happened accidentally or otherwise?
Yeah, it's a correct observation. So we generally, we want, from a just mission perspective, give an alternative to fast fashion, right? So we have, of course, clothes we could sell for much more, but we want to sort of have a sort of price level, which is then which substitutes, you know, companies like the products of H&M and Zara, and in an ideal case scenario, we make secondhand, take secondhand to mass market, right? And that across Europe, right? So that is a little bit where we want to go, make secondhand accessible and a first-hand alternative across Europe, right? But I don't know how to sort of define that into a sort of startup-y kind of sector.
Well, maybe
I'm
it
sorry.
doesn't have to be defined that way either way, right?
Yeah.
It's again, maybe at the end of the day, it's a little bit about the vibe that customer has, right, from using your product.
100%. You know, like the problem we see a lot is that, of course, you can get really nice items at the flea market, and I would advise everyone to do that also, right? However, you end up so often, you know, you want to wear also something fresh, right? Where do you buy your jeans, right? Where do you buy your denim jacket? You know, like, where do you buy your shirt? You're pushed, you know, because you don't find the right size, the right color, the right fitting, right, at the flea market. So we with Vinokilo want to be that option, right, that you don't get pushed to buy fast fashion, right?
Yeah, I really like this sort of narrative that you have, and it came across already several times about Vinokilo being an alternative to fast fashion. And I would love to get your take a little bit on the whole topic of sustainability in fashion, and maybe just starting from the point of, what is sustainable fashion for you personally? What is your definition of sustainable fashion?
Yeah, so for me, just be very open, transparent. I hate the word sustainable, right? Because like, everyone is using it. You know, ExxonMobil is sustainable, or, you know, like Shell is sustainable. You know, like, it's driving me nuts. You know, everyone is sort of using this narrative. So, but generally, you know, like, for me, sustainable fashion is a tough topic, because generally, even if you produce products sustainably, they're not sustainable or responsible, because you're using water, you're using scarce resources in the sort of production. So if you would stop now producing anything, I think we would have enough clothes to every day wear a different item for the next 5 years, 6 years to come. So if you honestly ask me, Robin, what shall we do? I would say, take your clothes, swap them, share them, lend them, thrift them, repair them, right? But don't buy anything anymore, you know? So, and then I'll be very honest, I'm very also critical towards Vinokilo and our future, because I think we, at one point, we have to make sure that that we provide, of course, secondhand clothes at scale, but I also think that reusing what we have in our wardrobes is the future, right? And making it last. And
I completely agree with you as well. And I think, from my side, also working in the industry, I have seen this rhetoric being used so much. And personally, I believe that it doesn't matter how circular we become, if we don't stop, or if we don't slow down the manufacturing process, no amount of recycling or secondhand or anything of that sort is going to help and fix the problem. So it's really about slowing down the production and then extending, reusing the items that we already have. I completely agree with you. For everyone who is joining us now, we will have time to take a couple of questions, so feel free to send us a question by pressing a small icon in the bottom with a question mark. So press that, type your question, and we will have some time at the end to go through that. But going back to the topic of sustainability, I know that you guys in your company, you really take it to kind of the next level and try to implement sustainable policies throughout the company as well. Could you tell me a little bit about what are the things that you are doing as a company, as a team, to make sure that you're, becoming as sustainable as possible?
Good question. So I think we're trying, right? So there is nothing where I'm like, I would not consider us at a good space at the moment, personally, right? But of course, every aspect of the company should somehow be responsible. Like we can't go and run events across Europe, right, and just always drive there, right? Or go by plane. It's just not possible, right? We can't create any sort of, at the event is a very sort of product artifacts heavy business, right? You want to make sure that that these products which you create are affordable, but at the end also last, right? So we're trying to replace plastic, we're trying to replace paper at the events, but in a sort of smart way, right? But it's a challenge constantly, and I think the thing which is my job is basically every time there is a sort of project or a topic, and we go there, just that you always think impact first, right? That you don't look at, okay, you talk the financials or you took the growth, you talk all these sort of other things there, but just make it sure, hey, is impact throughout the sort of project guaranteed? I think that's the most important.
Do you use any kind of framework internally to measure that, to see what kind of impact you have?
It's in the making. Right, truth be told, right? So we've worked with an external agency to measure what is the sort of impact we do with giving an alternative to people. I would never, just honestly, I think the clothing waste problem is so big that I would never say the clothes which we take back and reuse is of any significant impact if you look at the sort of gigantic amount of clothes which get thrown away. But for me, the sort of impact we do is how many people's minds do we turn, how many people don't buy fast fashion anymore because they bought from Vinokilo, right? So that is something we do measure with an external agency, but it's not enough, right? So we're working at the moment on extending that, right? But honestly, I'd love to hear also from you. What do you guys do?
It is so difficult, right? To be honest, it is very complicated. It reminds me a little bit of an episode of this TV show, The Good Place. I don't know if you watched it or not. So it's the idea there is that you die, and then there is sort of calculation of everything good and bad that you did, and then based on that you go either good place or the bad place. But they show the complexity of the current world, where even a good thing that you do, like helping like a grandma to cross the street, like actually can add up a lot in the negative stuff, because maybe she's carrying oranges that were produced somewhere where farmers are being exploited and so on. So I think it's so extremely hard in the current world to separate and untangle every piece of action that you take as a company. From our side, what we have been doing in my company, we are measuring returns. So as we as a technology company, we work with a lot of brands. So we measure the amount of returns that we prevent. And then we also have worked with a third-party company that helped us understand how much CO2 is emitted as a return. So based on that, we try to calculate the amount of CO2 emissions that we prevent as a very direct way of impacting it. But then it also became a little bit more complicated on the team level, because now we work as a fully distributed team. So with that, it's a little bit harder to estimate how much CO2 do we emit as a company, right? Before it was all in the office, now it's everyone is sitting from their own place. So it's a little bit more complex, but I definitely see that more companies are now trying to change the mindset around it and kind of implement it inside their teams and in the processes, not just greenwashing and kind of like putting on the website.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, just great that you're doing all these things. I think the thing which also the series I've never watched, like, but it makes so much sense, like you get caught up into this, like measuring on one side and measuring on the other side and constantly weighing off. And I think what we just need to go back to is really like what's in our hearts, right? And just as long as what we try to do or what the impact we do is true, right? That I think is somehow the one which will make us go above and beyond in also creating more impactful and responsible environment.
Yeah, and I think with that, just I would add, it's really about making sure that this as a sort of a thought and as a mindset, it's reflected in people that you work with as well, because that's how you amplify that message. That's how you amplify the impact that you have, right? It's just really having it as a part of sort of culture in a way.
100%.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, one
100%.
Yeah, go ahead.
May I ask also a question? Sorry.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. In that sense, what I've been wondering, and just also really like critical about what we do at Vinokilo. I had this sort of conversation the other day where someone was saying, "Hey, e-commerce is really not so sustainable because the higher amount of returns, etc." And I was just wondering, are you able to compare if, let's say, people don't travel to a city anymore because they're now doing e-commerce versus versus going to the city and buying there? Is that possible or is that not possible?
It is very tricky. So even in our calculations, when it comes to like the return sort of carbon footprint of returns, the best thing we could do there is to estimate average CO2 emissions for returns that are handled by couriers, as well as deliveries that are carried by couriers. Because in your logistics, there will be definitely a step where it's being taken back to the warehouse and sorted out and so on. But even with that, it was very much like the average of the average. So the calculations, the research we relied on, and the third party we worked with, they've done that research in London. So because it's a big enough city, and I think the average distance between the place that you start the return and the warehouse, it was around like 15 kilometers or so. Which is probably applicable to the majority of European cities. However, if you take the modern e-commerce giants, for instance, right, like Zalando's of the world and other bigger companies, often they have a customer, let's say in France, and a warehouse in Poland, right? And when a return happens, it often travels all the way throughout countries. Of course, some of them will have distribution centers in the middle, but in a lot of cases, it's either very hard to track or it will actually end up traveling all the way. And of course, in that case, it will be a very different story in terms of the emissions that it creates.
Yeah, I didn't think about. And is there technology in the future, I mean, like buzzword drones or something like that, where you think that could sort of tilt it even more positively towards e-commerce?
I personally think that when it comes to returns, the big reason why they happen is because the fashion e-commerce itself is not very, it doesn't deliver to what customers need when they make a decision around purchases. And I think returns in fashion specifically is just, a symptom of the disease. So I really hope that we as an industry would try to address the root cause of it versus throwing more sort of technology into more distribution centers or more delivery options and so on. Because I think that's kind of the right way. But probably, yes, we probably will see more drones or, like those little delivery robots or whatever it is, right? Like there are a couple of those being piloted in different places. Or maybe we will see, like one thing that we have seen with the pandemic is that people have been shifted more towards direct to consumer and shopping locally. So that's actually the trend that I hope will emerge stronger because we really need to revive those communities, right? And if everything is happening around the community, that could help as well.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Love hearing all of that. I would love to have 10 more questions.
No, absolutely. I'm sure we will continue this discussion. But I wanted to ask one question, and of course, it's a little bit talking about the pandemic and again, the growth of this industry. You guys now are active in 8 countries, right? Or so?
Event-wise, 8 countries, e-commerce-wise, 17 plus.
Okay. How did you go about international expansion? Like what was the plan initially? What were some of the hurdles? And I think this one is really for those founders who are probably listening in now and maybe they're thinking about expansion more internationally. Like what were some of the learnings from that experience?
Yeah, I think the biggest learning is just go for it, right? So I think it was very un-German in a way. We just decided this looks like a promising place, right? We have some local contacts, their friends who've recommended us the locations. Let's just try it, right? So without too much of like, I would say a research which sort of like petrified us in a way or paralyzed us in a way. We just went in it and then made hell of a mess, loads of mistakes, and then we're like, okay, but we got an idea, this sort of works, so let's try it again. You know, that is the sort of approach we went. And but also, I mean, it's a lot of also, sorry to say it again, it's a team, right? So we have a diverse team, and we have team members who say, hey, I'm from Italy, right? I would love Vinokilo to come to Italy, and we're like, yeah, if you find us a venue which is cheap enough, we will support you, right? And then he's like, Robin, I found a venue, would you give okay? Yeah, Matteo, I would give you okay. And then he's like, good, Facebook event is online. He had everything organized. I'm like, whoa, right? And suddenly it goes through the roof, you know? So these things happen as well, right? So we had an experience like that with an event in Norway, in Oslo. We had that with an event manager in Italy. So yeah.
And then one day you wake up and I'm like, well, I guess we're in Italy now.
yeah. So that's interesting, and yeah, having contacts and having a network and then a diverse team helps with the expansion, and generally I think, yeah, I wouldn't fear so much. Of course, there's a lot of administration when you go to a country, but no one will directly penalize you for when you create tax revenues for the government in that sort of country, right? They are lenient normally. They fear you, but beforehand, but they're quite lenient, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to.
I know this is the thing people. Yeah.
I will quote you on that advice. Was it the similar? Sorry, go ahead.
No, yeah, just the doing, right? So that is, I think, one of the best things. Yeah.
Was it the similar thinking when you thought about e-commerce expansion, or was it done somehow differently?
So e-commerce expansion was actually since day one we've been thinking about it, right? And the idea always in all transparency was that we use the events, right, as a sort of roadshow to build community, right, and onboard people towards also not only buying secondhand offline but also online, right? That we, in an ideal case, we give an alternative 365 days with the events offline if we come to the city, but if we're not there, they still buy online, right? So that was the idea, but it took us some time to find the right team, the right people to build it. And then now in Corona, you got an additional kick, obviously, right? So we had some e-commerce revenues going. We had a small store with 2,000-3,000 items, right? And now we have a store with around 35,000 items, and that's a Corona kick, I would say. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the pandemic. What is your, assumption of how the world around secondhand and fashion will evolve, as well as Vinokilo? How do you see the future of the company after the pandemic? Do you think it will just go back to the way you've done things before the pandemic, or will it change somehow?
I think I truly think that it won't go back to how it was before the pandemic. I think it will go to a place which is actually, and I'm very positive when I'm saying this, to a more beautiful place. I think the people coming to our events will be more. I think there will be a more older, more diverse crowd. I think they won't necessarily buy more, but they will make the experience of leaving the house or making their way to an event really worthwhile. And we're also sort of ready for it, right? Because we used to have events where we had a little bit of music going, live bands, DJ, we had some food, some drink, but we want to like accelerate this. So we want the people to go to actually mini festivals, where we are also a platform for young artists who have been struggling massively during the pandemic, right? If that is in music, if that is in art, if that is in craftsmanship, right? We want to work with other entrepreneurs, right? Who've created and built something. We want to offer that sort of platform for free, right? And we want the customers really to come and just have an amazing day with Vinokilo, right?
Yeah.
So that is how we believe the time after Corona will be. It will be a maximize of experience and a really buying less, but absolute more consciously, right?
Yeah.
And also the education part of our events will take a big step in front, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, it's definitely a very hopeful vision of the future. And I will be very, very happy if that's how the world after the pandemic will look like.
Yeah, I have very good hope, and I really think that a lot of people had time to sort of reflect and also think about some of the sort of bad habits they had, and I do hope that that sort of time for themselves will have matured into more conscious living across the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We will be opening the stage for some questions, but before we do that, I wanted to ask a little bit about the scaling part of the business, right? We talked a little bit about the sort of like the whole like shareholders' interest and running bigger companies in the world of secondhand and keeping sort of authenticity of your company. How do you see Vinokilo scaling? How do you find that right balance between staying true to yourself and building a successful business?
Truth be told, I don't have a complete answer to this yet, right? This is something we are just going through every single day, and I do think that we have to be attentive, right? To put our social and global impact first, and really are true to our teams, to our team, so we sustain that sort of authenticity. Because if we manage that, I think the customers will be there as well, and we will have a much more sustainable scaling, right, than if we just go into a sort of rush like many of the sort of former fast fashion brands.
Of course.
Does it make somehow sense?
No, absolutely it does, because I think and for me as a founder, it's also one of the challenges that I experienced as well. It's really a lot about the vision that you have for the company, and also in a lot of cases about how you choose to scale it. What kind of funding options you use, what kind of strategies you use. Are you going after aggressive growth no matter what? Are you trying to reach profitability? Are you trying to do something else, and so on? One thing that I saw, I think a couple of days ago on Twitter, that if I'm not mistaken, you guys have explored some alternative funding options for Vinokilo.
So I'm very, very happy to talk a bit about that. So generally during the pandemic, I mean, we we've been struggling, right? So very openly, we've been struggling, like many others have, and we have no sort of like VC funding background. So what we did, we went to just all sort of family, friends, and people we knew, and we asked for lending us money, right? So we gave them a small percentage, between 5 and 8%, right? And collected money like that. But next to that, we explored also revenue-based financing options like uncapped, right? Clearbank, right? So we've been exploring really all these sort of ways. Also, we've been approached by an impact fund who sits in Hamburg and who wants to talk to people who want to invest in impact, which is still ongoing. So we really try to exert everything that we could, right? Because I mean, banks are just rubbish, right?
Yeah. It is very
to say it at the
difficult.
very least. So that's what we've done. You can't rely on the governments. Banks are rubbish, right? So then you really try. And I think as an entrepreneur starting now something, I think the amount of alternative funding options you nowadays have, it's mesmerizing. It's absolutely mesmerizing. And I believe there will be so many companies who will in the first 5 years not be doing any angel rounds because they can really like get to a stage of healthy profits, right? Until they can get that sort of Series A growth capital in, you know.
Yeah.
That's really amazing to see.
No, I completely agree with you. And I think I myself, I have been looking into this space as well. And it's so amazing because I think it's really helping by giving more options to founders, right? Especially a lot of those like Clearbank and a couple of other solutions, at least what they claim on their website, that you're able to get a decision very fast. So you don't need to be like calling an investor, 10 times a week and figuring out where they're at and so on. Can you give some tips, maybe like 2-3 tips to entrepreneurs who would like to explore those alternative funding options? How to navigate between all of those different ones?
I mean, generally, I think there was an article on Sifted the other day, which I gave, I think, an overview of what sort of alternative funding options there are. I think that's like less than a week old. So that I think would be my starting point. And then generally, I would just start trying with one of the options which are given there and just like learn on the go, right? You don't have to from day one, that's the beautiful thing about all these new funding options. It's you learn with small amounts, right? And you're building a relationship with those companies, and very fast you can become eligible to actually bigger funding options.
No, that makes sense.
Start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we will now open up the stage for questions. And for everyone who is listening to it now, feel free to add your questions as well. You can do it by tapping a little icon in the bottom with a question mark. So we have the first question is from Ratty. And that question is, in which country do you sell most vintage clothes?
That's a really good question. Generally, we sell the most vintage clothes in Germany still, right? But just because we do more events in Germany. If I would break this down in a sort of per person scale, I think it would be Italy and Switzerland would be above Germany even. Right. So both those countries, we sell a lot of vintage clothes, right?
From user behavior perspective, do you see any new interesting emerging markets, let's say in Europe, that where customers are showing a lot of interest in secondhand?
I think it's actually almost every country, right, is jumping on secondhand or vintage clothes. I think what's interesting is that yeah, the different countries have different tastes, right? So we see that we won't sell the sort of same clothes which we would sell in Luxembourg, we wouldn't sell in Italy, and we wouldn't sell in Germany, right? So every country has their sort of speciality, and that is, yeah, amazing, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's also so true, right? So secondhand can be suitable for anyone and everywhere. It's just different type of styles that they will go for.
Yeah, 100%.
One other question we had here is about your growth goals. What are the company's growth goals?
So, would you say that's more growth goals as in financial terms, or visionary, or amount of people, kilos? What would you say?
Well, so it's a question from Reddy. So if Reddy is still with us, maybe they can clarify it. But the question is, where are your company growth goals? I guess it also comes down to how you determine growth, right? So if your growth is not necessarily connected to revenues, perhaps it could be some other metric.
So yeah, maybe that's actually a great idea. So for me, growth always means the amount of people we can reach, which then means the impact we can do, right? So that is how I think about scaling, right? Scaling equals impact for me. And yeah, and generally, I mean, we want to give an alternative throughout all of Europe. So from an event side, we're looking into France, and we're looking into Spain, we're looking into Czech Republic, we're looking into Poland, right? So all the countries we've not been to, right? We want to go to, right? Yeah, so that's one thing. Then growth can also be kind of services we offer to our customers. So we want to now offer at every event the opportunity to give your former favorite clothing items to us, right? So that is something where you get a chance to refresh your clothes and get new clothes at our events, right? So we offer that at our events, but we also offer that online, right? And of course, in the future, I hope we will do other things such as lending as well, right?
Yeah.
Lending, repairing, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the sort of growth goals. And if I look then far future, I do believe that Vinokilo might turn towards a service, right? And where we offer throughout the whole year, throughout the lifetime, right? For the kids, for people at an older age, right? Secondhand clothes, and that is either bought, lent, shared, or in a different way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, of course. And it does seem that the direction that you take, you took here with this question was what Roddy imagined as well. It's all about people, right? It's all about the impact on people that you have.
Yeah.
So that's great. The next question.
Rachel, I just saw.
What? Sorry.
I think that it was Rachel even. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm not mispronouncing. I'm just reading by the Instagram.
Yeah, the Instagram. Yeah.
Another question I had is about the biggest learnings that you had during the pandemic. And I assume that here it's more about the question of like learnings in terms of running the company.
Yeah. I think there's. I'm keeping a small diary at the moment where I'm just writing down a couple of learnings, because I feel I might never sort of go back to this sort of time. At least I hope. And I think two which are really big in there is the first one, which I sort of saw during the first 6 months, is that during a crisis, you want to jump as a leader on everything and fix all the problems you see, but the number one thing you need to fix is your people, right? Because what I saw, that people sort of paralyzed completely. They froze. No one sort of produced any quality of work, or hardly anyone, right? And it was just this complete moment of misery, right? And that needs to be your first fix. And then the second thing, which I sort of saw in the second phase, is that it's never over when you think it's over. It always something comes more, right? So these are the two things, right?
Yeah. Well, it's as a leader of the company, how do you also ensure that you yourself is taken care of and you remain like, on top of your game and you stay sane?
That's a good one. I have to say, I think for me it was not always easy, 100% not, but I had a really good support team around me, group family. So that's number one, and you should always have that around you to help you. I think really taking it as a challenge and just as a phase in the company and not pity oneself, right, is another one. Um, and then also really in all honesty, take good care of your body and make sure you exercise enough. I know the sound is sort of the typical thing which you hear at sort of every panel discussion or whatever, but I did more, right? And I think it's done me good. Yeah.
But I think
you're better towards the people around you when you're at that place.
Yeah, because of course, as a leader of the company, also a lot of people will look at you, right? Like I myself also experienced that as well during the pandemic. You personally go through some sort of experience there, right? As an individual, but then at the same time, you also have a team to take care of. I think it's an ultimate challenge for any founder and entrepreneur to make sure that they take care of themselves and they're able to be there for their team and for their people.
Yeah, and tell me what was sort of the learning for you, your number one or number two learning?
I think it's probably similar to you as well. Like, so first one is really, it was all about staying sane. And what helped me a lot is finding my anchors, finding things that allowed me to recharge and allowed me to sort of carry on. And very interestingly enough, like one of those things became long walks. So I will literally like just go around Copenhagen for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, just listening to a podcast or, usually podcasts. I love that. And it just became a really great way for me to connect with the nature, to get some exercise going, and then also just like have a little bit of a time to myself. And literally every time I'll come back from that walk, I will be like opening my laptop and taking notes because I will just have like this creative, storm of ideas. So I think that was one of them. And then the second one is really about, this metaphor that I've heard from one of my mentors is that when everything around you is shaking, like imagine it's a very sort of unstable waters, right? Like uncharted waters, and you're a little boat, you just focus on what you can do. So it's really about separating things that are in your control and focusing on that. And then things that are out of your control, you just have to let it go because you can't really control everything and focus on that.
That's a golden one.
Yeah. And I think that has become a really important one for me and my team as well, to make sure that we don't put extra pressure on ourselves for things that are out of our control.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. And it's been also really nice to see today during this conversation, the chat, so much love for you, Robin, it's great. and we even getting people saying how great of a boss you are. So I think it really resonated with me through this interview, through this discussion, how much people and the culture means to you. So if you have any other like sort of tips and advice for people, for founders and entrepreneurs, how to create a good environment at their team, I think that will be a really great way of wrapping it up as well.
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot, and I feel really honored by the words and also that what you just said, that people are writing. I think it sounds a bit cheesy, but just be yourself. That I think is one of the most important things, that you don't sort of like imitate what we see in the news, like people, I think founders a lot, they spend a lot of time reading TechCrunch, right? And then they want to be like these founders who are at TechCrunch. And I think that's not very healthy, right? At least I believe that. And I think, just be authentic and really try to create an environment which you love, right? And it's going to be hard times will come, and if you have not created an environment which you enjoy and which you love, then getting to work, getting to that place is even harder, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's all about that right vibe, right? And there are people that you.
There we go to the vibe again, right?
Yes.
And you should really visit us here in Mainz. What I really, one small anecdote is like, I think on the 2nd of January, right? I walked into the warehouse. Outside it was like -5 degrees. It was freezing. Like we didn't have New Year's, right? Everything was crazy. And then I walk into the warehouse, and people are making pictures for our online store, right? And listening to Good Vibrations by the Beach Boys, top of the. It was just so amazing, right?
Yeah.
So that gave me so much like positivity.
Yeah, no,
it's really cool.
I will tell you this as a customer. As I mentioned, I recently made a purchase on Vinokilo, and I really like that not only it arrived in a really nice box, but also like a handwritten note that it came with. It was really nice, and I think like that really adds that extra layer of feeling that, okay, you are not just buying from some website, you're buying from a bunch of cool people that are trying to make a difference. So I think it's
100%.
definitely something that you guys are, getting.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, listen, Robin, we've been going on for a little bit over than an hour. At the end, I would love to hear if there are any plugs, any announcement or anything that you wanted people to tell you, where they can find you, maybe on Twitter or Instagram.
Generally, I think find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I think I'm very thankful that I got this opportunity here, and I think it's a great format, and you are just very engaging, lots of interesting questions, right? And I think everyone who was here today, who came maybe through my channels, and you should come back when you do this session again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's always, it goes both ways, right? Like when you have interesting guests and interesting topics to talk about, it's always a much more engaging conversation. But on that note, yes, we do these Instagram sessions every Wednesday. So if you guys are interested in fashion and technology and sustainability, tune in next Wednesday at 8 p.m. European time. We will have another founder coming in and sharing their insights, giving their tips and advice. And
super.
Robin, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And I will. A
pleasure.
I will be following you and Vinokilo. I'm really excited to see what you guys come up with next.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Appreciate it. Ciao, ciao.